when a friend of mine, or anybody, but in this case, a friend, tells me before he started the podcast, it took a long time to get him to start the podcast,
Yeah.
You remember this. I've been telling him for years that he has to create content and is so talented and he should do it. And he always had some excuse, I'm not successful enough. Once I get this done, once I get that done. And then when he started, he was so inspired and excited about the results he was getting. People would share messages with him about that they enjoyed a latest episode, or an episode would create business for somebody, right? He would interview somebody on his podcast, and then his friends would reach out to him, or other people would reach out to him and ask to get an introduction to use the service or whatever that person was offering. Yep. And he was always so pumped about these results. I remember having conversations with him where he told me, I'm never going to stop, and you have to hold me accountable. You need to be my truth teller. Don't let me, get off the hook and all that. And I used to tell him.
Now he's like, oh yeah, but not now.
Yeah. And I used to tell him, dude, it's not that easy, because there were a couple of things that have happened in our friendship over the past number of years where he told me, I'm doing X, and I told him, I think X is a really bad idea. I think this makes very little sense to me. Are you really sure? And he would defend it violently and push really hard against it. And then it would turn out that, let's say X was a mistake, and would come back to me and say, why didn't you fight harder with me when I was doing, you knew that this was bullshit. Why didn't you tell me more forcefully? I remember you bringing it up, but you never brought it up again, or you didn't bring it up enough. And I was telling him, I remember once having a conversation with him and telling him, dude, this is not my responsibility, and it is taxing to be fighting with you about these things. Like, I'd rather have fun with you than fight with you every time. You're not listening anyways. Right? So what is the point in me fighting with you every time about this bullshit? And I remember him smiling and saying, yeah, you're right, but you have to, with me, you have to be forceful, he would always say. And then when a thing like this happens where he starts and he tells me I'll never stop, and then when he stops, I push, and then he falls into, in my eyes, in my soul, into this trap that I saw coming and that he told me I should warn him about, and once I warned him, he ignores me and fights me. That builds resentment in me, because then anytime we talk and the topic comes up, I honestly don't know. I wouldn't know what the fuck should I say now. I don't want to talk about this. I cannot, and I'm in this, usually I would be in this weird spot of, if I say something, I'll get upset because you're not going to listen. And so I won't say anything. But by not saying anything, I also feel bad because I feel almost untruthful, and so I would always feel awkward. And today the topic of the podcast came up, but then also, he brought it up, and then he brought up his current life situation and the business and how it's going and what he's doing next and this, that, and the other, and all these things. And part of me wanted to bring this up in an intellectual way and be telling him, listen, friend, remember all these conversations we had. Remember what you told me you wouldn't do. Remember what you've just done. Here's what you need to do next, right? And kind of try to get him to admit his fault and then change his ways, right? And then instead of doing that, I thought I really don't want to have this conversation. It really doesn't matter. But then we talked about IFS. He showed me some books that he bought about internal family systems in German. And I said, these books are dope. I read them. And then he had a moment of, he's like, we should talk about this on my podcast. I'm like, yeah, we should really talk about this on the podcast. And then a couple of minutes later, he started talking about the podcast and some other stuff. And as I was debating internally what to say, I thought, what's the point of having an argument or making a case to what? To be told that I'm right? And then for him to magically agree and change his ways? This makes no sense. And then I just told him, dude, you said we should talk about this on your podcast? When? And he's like, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that. I'm like, let's just talk next week about it. He's like, yeah, I also had this idea to interview this person, and I idea to interview that. And then he told me about all the people he wants to interview. And then I thought, those are great ideas, dude. You should interview them. And then he started telling me that it's too much work to interview these people. He's like, yeah, it's different with you. With you, I can just take the raw recording because you're good at it and we usually jive well, and I can just publish it. But when I interview other people, I have to listen to it multiple times. I have to do a lot of editing. It's just a lot of work. And then I thought, again,
That is true, but then just record with you.
yeah, see, there was a part of me that wanted to argue about that, but then I was like, okay, well, when are we going to record then? I was like, let me not respond to the it's so much work with other people. Let me just focus on the it's not that much work with you. Like, so can we just record then? He's like, yeah, maybe not next week because I have this and this and that. I'm like, the week after? It's like, yeah, let's see, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if we're going to record or not. I think even the last recording, to be honest, that we've had, if I remember correctly, he didn't publish. I don't know why. But it was, that whole exchange took 4 minutes. It was infinitely more fun to me to just offer the next step together. Hey, let's just take the step together. If it's easy with me, let's just do it. And instead of talking to him theoretically about why have you stopped doing it? It was so good. You should start doing it again. You need to do it. See, you're doing the thing I told. Instead of doing all that, rehashing the past, just offer a step that would create momentum to get him back into it, you know? Yeah. And let's see, maybe we'll record, maybe we won't. But this whole little exchange with him brought up this thought of this, you know, there's oftentimes a choice between I don't know how to express this, but let's discuss this again, or let's rehash the past, or let's try to argue this out, or let me get you to agree that I was always right, or let me convince you to agree to some decision you ought to make in the future. And instead of discussing these things, you can just offer an action that would lead him down that path anyways. Yeah. Like, offer the action versus having the discussion, right? Instead of sitting at a bar with a friend and talking to him about, you need to be confident. If you want to find a woman, you have to go up to a woman. Here's how you go up to a woman. You have to learn an opening line, or you have to learn how to be yourself. Look, here's 10 women. Why don't you make a decision now which one you want to talk to? And then instead of having a discussion, you could just look at your friend and go, hey, do you think this girl is cute? Yeah. All right, let's go over and say hi. You could just grab your friend and say, let's go and say hi together, right? Offer the action to help versus having the discussion where you want to share all your wisdom and you want the other person to agree with you and you want them to make decisions about the future. And like, it's all kind of an intellectual exchange versus getting the person to do the thing that would solve all the problems, which is ultimately is you want them to take the action, whatever the action is. Make the decision, take the action. And so you can help with the decision or with the action versus getting stuck in wanting to have the conversation and the discussion. It's one of my favorite things of co-founder meetings with Anthony and Tom is that many, many years ago at a co-founder dinner, when we used to do a dinner every week together, we still all lived in the Bay Area. At one dinner, Anthony we were discussing things about the business, this problem, this opinion, this idea, that idea. And we were jumping from topic to topic. And mostly we would just open a topic, discuss all the worries and thoughts we have about it, and then it would lead to the next topic where we just opened all the drawers, all the problems, all the different, and then we just move on to the next topic. And most of the things we would say were things we had said before in chat, in an email, in some exchange. And I remember Anthony saying, all right, let's stop talking about all these things. What decision are we going to make right now? Let's just make a decision. I don't care what decision. Let's just make a decision. And then we sat there for a minute in silence. And I remember going, well, the easiest of all these topics was this topic. Should we just do this? And he was like, done. We're just doing this. Tom, you in agreement with it? Tom is like, yeah, all right, let's do this. Okay, what else can we decide right now? And then we went through, I think, 2 or 3 decisions where before we were in discussions, stuck in discussions, right? And
I like the ring of that also.
yeah, discussion versus decision.
Discussion. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember that ever since then, and we had, we hadn't seen each other in 1.5 years now, since the whole pandemic thing happened. And then we spent a week in Utah together in Park City. And every time we would start having, we didn't have that many business discussions. We really spent the week just having fun and doing activities and being in nature and just being friends, basically. But anytime we would start a business discussion, after a little while, either me or Anthony would bring up, all right, decisions. Can we make any decision right now? How many decisions have we made this week? 2. Can we make a third decision? Because decisions create clarity, right? They point to an action. Something has been decided now. We made progress. We checked off on something. Versus discussions often, sometimes you need some amount of discussing and then contemplating. But especially when it's difficult topics, complicated topics, where it's not crystal clear or super simply easy to point to what the right thing is, you just eventually somebody just has to make a call. They have to decide something. Even if the decision is, this is a topic that I feel we need to snooze. Look again in 6 months. Let's not talk about this for the next 6 months. That is a decision. But it's the middle case, the case where we constantly think and talk about it, but we're never feeling ready to make a decision around it. It's those things that just drag everything down and pollute everything. And I love that. That's something Anthony started, and it became sort of an unspoken tradition. When the three of us are together, inevitably, at some point, somebody will go, what decisions can we make right now? What can we decide right now that we haven't decided yet? And it always leads to good stuff. The discussions we have, it's a very mixed bag. Sometimes they lead to good things, but many, many times we just kind of repeat, we just sort of go merry-go-round around something and don't really end up anywhere. And so in the same way, today, instead of discussing with Sofian for the 100th time why he ought to keep publishing every week, why he ought to not stop creating content, why there's no excuse for stopping, why I had told him so, the big finger, the waving finger in the air. Didn't I tell you you would end up in this place? Now look at you in this place. Can I get my right? Can I get my I told you so? Instead of doing that bullshit, I just went, can we do a recording? Let's just do a recording. Yeah. How about next week? And it both, I think, is more helpful and useful to the end goal that all parties have. But also selfishly today, it was just more fun. It was so much better to just go, can we record next week, than to start a whole speech about I told you so and see where you are and all that bullshit. What can we decide today, right? Oh, with friends, what action can I help you take? Especially when we get angry with people, it's because it's something that feels easy to us that the other person is resisting. Yeah. Right? And oftentimes the other person will bring up all the reasons why it's difficult. And then we bring up all the reasons why it isn't this difficult. Instead of going back and forth in this, getting lost in this discussion, is it difficult, is it not difficult, just offer to help with an action or to help make a decision. And one next step. Let's just take a step together. And there again comes encouragement and the power of, and the beauty and magic of action, which is instead of being in our heads, let's be in the world. Let's be in life and do something. Right? Let's take a step, that next step together. And then once we've taken a couple of steps, then the person might keep going on their own, and maybe not. Maybe they'll stop. But it still will be much better, a much better experience, more useful, more helpful, more valuable usually, than let's have the same discussion for the 100th time.